Bloque de Cine Continuado y como les prometí, vamos a seguir con el Festival Internacional de Cine de Mar del Plata. Y una de las entrevistas que tuvimos la oportunidad de hacer fue a la directora Prano Bailey-Bond, directora galesa, que hizo una película fantástica que se llama Censor, del año 2020, pero que la pudo presentar este año en Mar del Plata. Fue la primera vez que se pudo ver en Latinoamérica en salas de cine, si bien algunos ya la habíamos visto por ahí, ¿sí? Y además vino a ser parte del jurado de la competencia internacional del festival. Pudimos hablar con ella de muchos temas. La película, si no la vieron, habla de una censora que en la época de Margaret Thatcher se encargaba de cortar las películas y hasta incluso de dar su veredicto para que la película directamente no se pasara por ningún lado. Y al mismo tiempo tiene un pasado oscuro a partir de una desaparición de un familiar de su hermana cuando ella era chico. Entonces, ambos mundos en algún momento van a chocarse. El tema de la censura en los 80 en Gran Bretaña y por otro lado, esta historia familiar que pesa sobre ella. Es la historia de las videonastis. Las videonastis eran esa lista de películas en las cuales se incluían aquellas que no podían exhibirse ni en cine ni tampoco en VHS, o si se exhibían con severos cortes, ¿no? Los cortes tenían que ver con aquellos momentos que fueran gráficos en cuanto a la violencia, en cuanto al sexo, porque dentro del gobierno de Margaret Thatcher se creía que esas películas eran las que invitaban a que el público que las veía quisiera imitar lo que pasaba ahí y que de alguna forma se le echaba la culpa a todo el malestar social que había en aquel momento en Gran Bretaña a las películas, ¿sí? No a las políticas de Margaret Thatcher de recortar presupuestos, de quitar planes sociales, de bajar los salarios, sino que tenía que ver con las películas, imagínense, ¿no? Y esto me parece que viene muy bien, sobre todo para pensar cómo algunos candidatos, ¿no?, que estamos por votar, celebran a Margaret Thatcher, ¿no? Entonces vamos a ver otro costado de lo que fue la época de Margaret Thatcher, un poquito acá en la nota que presentamos ahora mismo, que le pudimos hacer a Prano Bailey-Bond. Si están escuchando, sugiero que vayan a Twitch o a YouTube de Punto Cero para que la puedan ver porque la nota está subtitulada. Así que bueno, vamos nomás a la nota de Prano Bailey-Bond que pudimos hacer en Mar del Plata.
Bueno, mi primera pregunta es, ¿qué consecuencias cree que dejó la censura de las videonastis para las generaciones actuales en Gran Bretaña?
I think that the consequences were bigger at the time, at the period during the period. You know, this was a period when we were living on. I mean, I say we. I was a tiny child. We were living under the Thatcher rule and the Iron Fist, they call it, where there was a lot of job cuts. There was a lot of cuts to services, mental health services, therefore a rise in crime going on, which was blamed on video nasties. There was a scapegoat, available. So I think that what was going on at the time was kind of more dangerous, but we have echoes of that now in different ways, where there are scapegoats being used in the media to distract from what the government are doing. I think we're seeing the same thing now with refugees, where the government take away so much from society and then blame it on the refugees because then they don't have to take responsibility. So interestingly, I think because of the video nasty era, when we're talking about the horror fans, actually what it did was it gave birth to a horror community, because when a community is oppressed, they find other ways around, so there was a network of people sharing these horror films and fighting the fight for horror. And that's almost given birth to what we now see as like the horror community in the UK today. So I think that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Mi segunda pregunta es acerca de la estrategia visual que pensó para los interiores de Censor, como en el lugar de trabajo de Enid y en la escena del restaurante con los padres. ¿Cómo trabajó eso en cuanto a la opresión?
the oppressive feel was something I was really I really envisioned early on, and actually it came from initially going into the British Board of Film Classification and looking at their files and the way that the offices are all underground, they have no windows. I spoke to a film censor who worked during the period who didn't like horror, and she said she had to go and sit in these rooms with no windows watching these horrible scary films, and she said she'd leave work and she'd feel a little bit dirty, and she described the space as like this kind of claustrophobic place, and then she'd leave work at night so she wouldn't see daylight and walk down alleyways and be scared because of things that she'd seen in the films at work. And I loved her description, and it started to make me think about how to design the censor's office itself. And I thought a lot about a film called Watership Down, which is a very political novel that was turned into a terrifying children's animation, which I saw as a child. But there's these rabbit warrens, and they're really oppressive, and you hear like the whispers of rabbits down the end of the tunnels. And I loved the idea of the screaming from other films kind of echoing through these corridors. And I think, essentially it needed to feel oppressive for Enid. It needed to feel claustrophobic for her as a character because she's repressed, she can't express herself. And so I think that began to echo into all the other locations as well. And we talked a lot about colour, like Enid's house is the colour of bruises. We described it as the colour of bruises in the script, that it's her internal world and it's bruised. So I tried to pull that into the design as well. But it's interesting you mentioned the restaurant, because that was filmed after the main shoot, just after the COVID lockdown. So it was a whole other way of filming, which meant the filming felt oppressive because you're so restricted by COVID regulations.
Yes.
As a team, as a filmmaking team, yeah.
That is the beginning of the madness for Enid, the oppressive office of the British Council. That's great.
Yeah.
Mi tercera pregunta es la idea de crear una historia con un tono de slow burn. ¿Estuvo desde el principio o se fue gestando durante el proceso de escritura?
Question, do you want to?
I think we always knew that the script was going to build towards the final sequence. So knowing that that's quite explosive, the final sequence, we always knew that it was going to take steps, step by step. It was going to build towards that denouement. Yes. So in the sense, yeah, it was always there in the script. It was always conceived that she starts as a normal person, apparently living a normal life, and then as you go further and deeper into it, you go further and further into the madness. So yeah, it was in the script. Yeah.
I think it's worth it because the gory scene is in the end, and it's better that way.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add some more.
Oh, only I think it's a psychological film, and it was very much about getting into Enid's head. When I came to actually directing the film as well, you're thinking, how do I keep the audience in the mind of an unreliable narrator who is, questioning her own moral compass and whether she's a good person, but she never actually says anything really honest out loud. So it was something we talked about in the script. How do we be in her head without her ever expressing herself? We talked about whether or not she should have a best friend who she told things to. You see this trope but it didn't make sense for Enid, because the whole point is that she can't express herself, and it all gets really twisted up inside. And so it was always about being in her mind and creating an atmosphere that was quite unsettling, but sort of teetering on the edge of things. So I think that's what the slower burn kind of served. Yeah.
Mi siguiente pregunta es ¿cuáles son sus películas favoritas de la lista del Video Nasty? Si es que tiene alguna.
Okay. I like these kind of questions. So I mean, when I was a teenager, it was because I only knew the more popular ones, like the more well-known ones. So I kind of grew up watching like The Evil Dead, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then Suspiria is obviously amazing. But then, as I kind of started to find access to more and more films, I discovered films like there's a film called Axe. It's another name for it is Lisa Lisa, and it's about a mute girl who's kind of imposed upon by a group of men, and it was made for like something like $18,000 by a bunch of kids out in the middle of nowhere in the States. That's great. I think possibly one of my favorites is The Witch Who Came from the Sea. And that's like a very kind of woozy, nightmarish film about a woman who is suffering PTSD from sexual abuse as a child, and you never quite know if what she's doing is real or not real, and it really plays with like fantasy and reality. It's got a lot in common in a way with Censor. I think they'd make a good double bill.
¿Cuál cree que es la película que más ridículamente está puesta en esa lista, que la lee ahora y diga, no puede creer que esté esta
Las
película?
videonasties.
Sí, de las videonasties.
Most of them, yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Quiero preguntarle sobre el final de Censor.
I think as we were writing the script, there was always this hope that we could maybe give Enid a happy ending. I think we fell in love with her, but she can never have a happy ending
Of course.
unless it's a fictional happy ending. So I think that was where we kind of leaned into going somewhere that felt more extreme and felt more mad in a way. There was a lot of conversation during the development of the script about whether or not we tied up what happened to Nina, and we talked a lot during the script writing process about the idea of ambiguous loss, and not knowing what happened is its own form of torture, and that's what Enid is living through. She's basically going through the idea of, okay, well, maybe she was murdered and then I grieve, but then you don't have the proof, so then you feel guilty for giving up, and then you think, well, maybe she's out there, and the exhaustion and the trauma of that fantasy that's running in your mind, which was so much a part of her story, and where it fits in with the video nasties and the films that she's seeing at work and all the different possibilities. And it felt disingenuous to then come to the end and explain all of that, because she never knows, and in a way that is her continuous torture. So we were more interested in letting the film and the idea of what might have happened live on in the audience's mind, and perhaps people will watch the film one day and think maybe she had something to do with it. Perhaps the next day they'll think no, she didn't. And so I like that idea that it can be something that you as the audience, you're giving that to the audience for them to untangle themselves and continue existing with. But I think all of those things kind of built up to the idea of like where the design went with the ending. Do you want to add something?
No, I just think the only other thing is that it came very late in the process. It was like, it wasn't like that ending came right at the very end of a 3-year writing process. So it was like something that evolved, and it's like something that was building up, especially in Prano. Like it's like, and it suddenly kind of erupted. This really beautiful, but it's a very beautiful ending for me. It's a really, it's an amazing and beautiful ending. And it's just interesting that it wasn't there at the beginning. You know, we didn't know that that's where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So there's this whole process of gestation. You know, like,
yeah, there's some films you kind of know where you're going at the end, and sometimes you're trying to find the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a really scary ending. For a happy ending, I mean. That's great. Mi última pregunta, last question.
Yeah.
¿En qué estado está la adaptación de Las cosas que perdimos en el fuego? Supongo que la contestó miles de veces ya.
Do you want to answer this one this time?
yeah, okay. Well, we are basically we're developing a script. You know,
Okay.
that's where we're at. We've been working on it for a while now. We're not there yet. It's going to take a little bit longer to get there. And I don't know. It's something we're really excited about. It's an amazing story. It's a really powerful story. Very difficult story to tell because of the gender political elements of it, which are provocative.
Yes.
which is exciting, but also really, really hard to manage.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge. I think that's the best word. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything Anthony said, I echo, and I think we're hoping that we'll get to make it soon. At the moment, we don't know, but I feel very honoured to be adapting it. And I was lucky to meet Mariana last year on a film jury in another festival, and she's a wonderful, amazing person, and I have a lot of respect for her. And yeah, it's really great to be in Argentina as well while we're writing the script. For me, it's my first time here, and this is where she comes from. This is where the story is set, even though we are relocating it. So yeah, maybe the experience here will even seep into our process.
I think you and Mariana are the perfect combination. So
Yeah.
the movie.
It's a good fit.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope so. I love her.
Bien, ahí pasaba la querida Prano Bailey-Bond hablando de su película Censor, sí, también un poco de lo que decía ahí al final, algo que nos une con Argentina porque en teoría ella va a hacer la adaptación de Las cosas que perdimos en el fuego de Mariana Enríquez, sí, esta es una noticia que se dio a conocer hace un año y pico más o menos, pero por el tema de, creo que la pandemia y también cosas que tienen que ver con los procesos de producción, hicieron que por el momento el proyecto esté un poco ahí como enfriado, ¿sí? Esperemos que se pueda hacer porque creo que, como decía ahí, yo sinceramente creo que es una muy linda combinación que la escritora y que Prano Bailey-Bond puedan combinarse y hacer una película juntas. Bueno, como decía, Prano Bailey-Bond también fue parte del jurado de la competencia internacional del Festival de Cine de Mar del Plata, por eso era muy común verla temprano en el auditorium dando vueltas y también por diferentes salas del festival. También dio una charla junto a Toby Poser. No vamos a poder ver la nota de Toby Poser porque nos quedamos sin tiempo, pero la vamos a ver probablemente la semana que viene. Dio una charla con ella, con Toby Poser y con Demian Mugna, el director de Cuando acecha la maldad, una película de la que se está hablando mucho, que la comentamos la semana pasada acá con Martín. La charla fue muy linda porque fueron 3 maneras de, no de pensar el cine, sino de cómo producir, ¿sí? Porque Prano Bailey-Bond está más encaminada a lo que puede ser un sistema de producción de películas tradicional, ¿sí? De hecho, ella hablaba un poco está con ganas de hacer algo más mainstream, algo con un buen caudal de presupuesto. En cambio, Toby Poser es parte de la familia Adams, ¿sí? Que hacen películas con unos modos completamente distintos, mucho más artesanales, mucho más autogestivos casi, ¿sí? Filman cerca de su casa, ellos viven en Portland, en el noroeste de los Estados Unidos. Es decir, es algo completamente distinto, ¿sí? Por el lado de Damián Mugna, un director argentino que la pega ahora, si bien la película anterior, Atrapados, tuvo un moderado éxito, es una gran película también, pero como en esta película, Cuando acecha la maldad, me parece donde va a poder dar un salto que veremos para dónde es, si es para Hollywood o para seguir haciendo películas acá en Argentina, ojalá más lo segundo, porque creo que acá va a poder tener un control mayor de sus películas, de sus obras. De todos modos, indefectiblemente teniendo en cuenta el género y teniendo en cuenta el éxito que además tuvo en Estados Unidos, donde se estrenó primero la película, se estrenó en más de 800 salas, que es una cosa inédita para una película argentina. Pensemos que Argentina en 1985, una película que estuvo nominada al Oscar, que ganó el Globo de Oro, que dio vuelta por festivales, creo que no estuvo ni en un 10% de lo que estuvo esta película, Cuando acecha la maldad. Entonces, pensemos también que una película argentina, hablada en castellano, con actores que no son los más populares de nuestro país, llegó a casi, diría, 1000 salas en Estados Unidos. Es un montón hasta incluso para una película de aquel país, ¿sí? Entonces, la charla que dieron ellos tres en Mar del Plata fue muy linda porque se combinaron estos tres modos de producir películas, más allá de que ambos, mejor dicho, los tres, trabajan con el mismo género, las formas son diferentes, ¿sí? Fue una linda charla de 2 horas y muy bien moderada por la siempre distinguida Fer Mujica, que hizo preguntas súper interesantes, que disparó charlas muy lindas, ¿sí? Porque en general este tipo de actividades no suele tener quizás el mejor o la mejor moderadora, quizás no son siempre las mejores preguntas. En este caso fue todo lo contrario porque Fer Mujica, que es probablemente una de las mejores críticas de cine de este país, la llevó muy bien adelante. Fer además es programadora del festival desde el año pasado, ojalá que siga por mucho tiempo más. Muy bien, es momento de que nos vayamos, sí, son 20:54. ¿Podremos poner el temita antes de irnos o nos vamos directo, querido Tino? Bien, entonces nos vamos como quiera Tino. Vamos con el tema, bien, vamos a escuchar a las ligas menores haciendo a 1200 kilómetros. Muchas gracias Tino por operar, muchas gracias a todos por escucharnos, a Leila, a Belén, a Sebastián, a todos los que nos escuchan siempre. Y nos vamos a volver a encontrar el próximo jueves, espero que con un país, ¿sí? Y con Martín Cataldi, por supuesto, aquí acompañándonos. Mi nombre es José Tripodero, nos vemos el próximo jueves acá en Punto Cero. Adiós.